Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 93. The Zoloft Defense. War Baby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. How well can we halt the evolution of a killer? Is it possible? Is there any way to stop the invasive thoughts of a child or ensure that a kid who is exhibiting increasingly disturbing behavior doesn't progress to murder? Especially when he wants to? It's difficult to say what the most effective combination of diagnoses and treatments would be in this situation, and just as difficult as a parent to determine what you should actually do. And what happens when you follow professional advice only to have the situation worsen? For the parents of 17-year-old Gavon Ramsay, they looked for a reason. I'll tell you now that this episode is brought to you by StoryWorth, so consider this your friendly reminder that Mother's Day is just a few weeks away. Even true crime podcast enthusiasts like ourselves have to stay rooted in the real world, and that includes celebrating and appreciating our beloved mothers, stepmothers, mothers-in-law, aunts, grandmothers, and godmothers. Honestly, any mother you love counts when it's gift-giving time. After the year we've just experienced, I'm sure that the mother figure in your life will appreciate such a heartfelt gift. StoryWorth is more than a present. It's the gift of bonding and engaging with your loved ones in an ingenious way that will bring endless amounts of future joy. Each week, your mom or other lucky loved one will receive a prompt by email, like, "What did you want to be when you grew up?" And at the end of 1 year, their weekly stories plus photos are bound into a beautiful book, shipped completely free. Give your mom the most meaningful gift this Mother's Day with StoryWorth. Get started right away with no shipping required by going to storyworth.com/warbaby, and you'll get $10 off your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/warbaby for $10 off. Back to our discussion of the week. Please be advised that this episode contains talk of sexual assault and substance abuse in addition to brutal murder. Can you stop a kid from becoming a killer, and what happens when you're just too late? 17-year-old Gavon Ramsay's parents faced such a dilemma. Gavon's mother recalled him as a sweet, caring, energetic, and helpful young boy. His maternal grandmother lived with his family from when he was 3, and his dad's parents lived just a few blocks away, giving Gavon and his 3 brothers a large, loving family within a very small area. At 7 years old in 2008, however, it became evident that Gavon was beginning to exhibit disruptive behavior. A teacher suggested the 2nd grader be evaluated for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and his pediatrician prescribed the medication Adderall XR soon after. But within months, the adults in Gavon's life noticed that the medication was ineffective, and he was switched to Strattera, which he remained on until 2012. Just prior to stopping his ADHD medication, it is reported by Gavon's mother that he was sexually molested by an older neighborhood boy. His parents filed a police report, but they didn't really agree with putting Gavon under a spotlight to be interrogated, so they turned instead to a psychologist in the area. An assessment took place in 2009, and treatment continued through 2010. Court testimony indicates that Gavon began treatment again in 2011. The fourth grader had taken a friend's airsoft gun to school for safety, although they don't say whom he thought was a threat. The issue was laid to rest with a 10-day suspension for the 10-year-old. The psychologist also treated Gavon that year after he tried to choke himself following a fight with his father, also when he was 10. In 2012, Gavon had a session after having issues in school, and records indicate that his ADHD medication was also stopped that year. She noted that by his own admission, Gavon began to abuse alcohol and drugs, eventually leading to a substance abuse issue so all-encompassing that he would develop a 3-joint, fifth of alcohol a day habit by the time he was 16 years old. Not only did he smoke marijuana, but he also took LSD, abused inhalants, and the prescription drug Concerta, a stimulant used to treat ADHD that he bought from kids at school. In 2015, when he was 14 years old, a friend was shot, and Gavon's father was diagnosed with leukemia, after which he began getting into trouble with the law. His record shows a fairly clear pattern of escalating risky behavior, just for the thrill. Gavon's mother testified that his father's diagnosis hit him hard, as would be expected. He'd even had a sobbing spell during which the principal sent him home from school for the day. At night, however, it seems that the teen had a second life, wreaking havoc on the streets of Wadsworth, Ohio. A 2015 felony breaking and entering charge saw him back at the psychologist after he climbed up a 3-story building and snuck in through a hatch door. He climbed on top of a church and on top of a school, resulting in a charge of criminal mischief, which he was also charged with after spray painting his own name and date at a park, as well as after throwing eggs at cars with some other kids. His paternal grandmother passed away in 2016, and Gavon was seen by the psychologist that year as well, after violating probation. It wasn't until January 2018 that Gavon was put back on some sort of medication. By then, he was admittedly drinking as much alcohol as he could every day, stealing it from stores or from his parents, any kind of booze from wherever he could get it. The principal of Gavon's high school called his mother in late January of 2018, letting her know that a friend of her son reported that the 16-year-old was exhibiting concerning behavior at school. They felt that he was in danger of harming himself. He was back at the psychologist's office within 2 days of the incident. His first appointment ended with the decision that Gavon could either choose therapy, medication, or a combination, and he decided to stick with just talk therapy. However, by about 15 minutes in, his appointment the following week was halted to let Gavon's mother know that he should be put on medication immediately. His pediatrician prescribed Zoloft at 25 milligrams per day, which was increased to 50 milligrams on the 5th day, then to 75 milligrams 2 weeks later and 100 milligrams after that, where he stayed for the next 2 months. It was during this time, his mother would later testify, that she had begun to notice irritability and aggression in her son, and he was restless and talkative. When his grandfather passed away in March of 2018, Gavon was annoyed that he seemed to have no feelings about it, even though he knew he should be more upset, which dismayed him even further. What he should have been dismayed about, however, was his own increasing depravity. The Wadsworth High School 11th grader had been writing regularly in his purple journal, detailing his growing interest in serial killers, rape, and murder. He seemed particularly interested in the life of Ted Bundy, writing an entry about the murderer which he entitled Crazy Necrophiliac. Another entry read in part, quote, "I'm starting counseling soon and I'm honestly glad I am. I don't care that I feel the way I do, but I need counseling before I completely go off the deep end and do something that literally ruins my life. I wouldn't feel bad if I kill someone, but I don't want to sit in fucking prison. That would suck. I really need to stop drinking, but it drowns out the pain and I probably won't stop. I think if counseling doesn't help me, I'm honestly going to kill someone. I'm not just saying that. I'll probably take a girl into the woods and rape her and kill her. I wouldn't feel bad about it, but I know it's wrong. I think I'm just a depressed sociopath, to be honest." An entry from the journal dated January 19th, 2018 read, quote, "I can control my thoughts and urges most days, but some days I just want to fucking go off on someone and beat them until they're not breathing anymore. It's not even for attention or anything. I honestly want to take someone's life. I want to know what it would feel like to stand over someone's dead body." Less than 2 weeks later, he'd be prescribed Zoloft. Unbeknownst to his parents, Gavin had been using the phone app Grindr under the pretense of sex with older men, but also to target men to rob at 16 years old. He'd even stolen an empty cologne bottle from one of his victims, keeping it as a trophy, reminiscent of Bundy. 2 months after starting Zoloft, Gavon Ramsay's desire to harm someone overtook him, and in the early hours of Friday, April 6, 2018, he snuck around the corner and 5 houses away, and under the quiet cover of darkness, entered the home of 98-year-old Margaret Douglas through her unlocked front door. She had purchased her home on Portage Street in Wadsworth, Ohio, just outside Akron, after marrying her husband Donald. They lived there together for 50 years or so, and then she lived there alone for another almost 2 decades following his death. At almost 99, Margaret amazed neighbors and relatives with her opinions and independence, still doing her own shopping and paying her own bills. Though physically unable to get down and tend her own garden, Margaret still loved her flowers and was looking forward to being 100 years old. Gavon Ramsay, who had turned 17 just a few weeks prior on March 23rd, was previously known to her, as he did say that he had spoken to the neighbor in the past about doing side work for her, like mowing her lawn or light maintenance on her home. It had to have come as a shock for her to have awoken on her couch to see him standing there, recording her on his cell phone. According to his later statement, Gavin said he'd only entered the home in search of a thrill. However, once he woke Margaret by accident, he made the decision to drag her body off the couch and strangle her with both hands. His next actions were beyond heinous, with Gavin himself unable or unwilling to describe the motivations behind his deviant behavior. I'll let the prosecutor and forensic psychologist from his sentencing explain this part because I don't want to say the words.
Do you recall the video images of Mr. Ramsey's hand, plastic gloved hand, I should say, using Mrs. Douglas's hand to masturbate himself?
I do.
After she was already dead, apparently.
Yes.
Do you recall the video of Mr. Ramsey's plastic gloved hand inserting his finger into her vagina?
Again, I can't remember if it's a picture or a video, but yes.
Do you recall during your interview with Mr. Ramsey that he told you he doesn't remember why he used the jelly?
Yes, I recall that. Well, no, he said it was for lubrication.
I apologize. Let me correct the record. He said he didn't know where he got it. Didn't remember where he got it, whether it was the refrigerator or it was just out there somewhere. But he used the jelly as a lubricant.
After being in Margaret Douglas's home for roughly 2 hours, Gavin realized it was after 4 a.m., so he dragged her body to a tiny closet in the living room and shoved her inside, covering her with her vacuum and clothing pulled from the hangers above. He made it back home and into bed before his mother got up at 5 a.m. on Friday morning. The photos and videos he made throughout the break-in and murder were placed into his secret file on his phone that he named Dark and password protected with the word murder. 2 days later, Gavin carjacked a man he met on Grindr, abandoning his car about a block from where he was picked up, and he was able to get away. It was the very next day that Margaret's nephew called Wadsworth police to request a welfare check at her home.